Bangladesh, the beating heart of the global garment industry. A country that stitches clothes for nearly every brand you can name, from Zara and H&M to Levi's and Nike. But one fiery night, all of that came to a standstill. A sudden inferno erupted at Dhaka's Hazrat Shahjalal International Airport, engulfing warehouses, crippling operations, and causing massive losses for the nation's garment exporters. Millions of dollars worth of goods destined for Europe and America, gone. Flights delayed, shipments grounded, exporters panicking, and for a country whose economy depends on ready-made garments, the impact was nothing short of catastrophic. This is the shocking story of how one airport fire sent shockwaves through Bangladesh's economy, global supply chains, and the lives of millions who depend on the needle and thread to survive. Stay tuned, because the truth behind the Bangladesh airport blaze is more explosive than the fire itself. The night of the fire, chaos at Dhaka Airport. It was just after 9 p.m. at Dhaka's Hazrat Shahjalal International Airport, the country's busiest aviation hub. Cargo handlers were moving boxes, forklifts humming, and exporters waiting for final clearance on their shipments, mostly ready-made garments heading to Europe. Then, chaos. A sudden spark in the cargo complex, near the cargo village warehouse, turned into a small fire. Within minutes, flames shot through the ceiling. "Fire in cargo section! Fire! Fire!" someone shouted over the radio. At first, workers tried to control it with extinguishers, but the flames spread fast. Fabrics, cartons, packaging materials, all turned into perfect fuel. Within 10 minutes, the entire export cargo storage area was ablaze. Thick black smoke billowed into the night sky. Sirens blared. Firefighters rushed in from across the airport. Passengers waiting for flights saw the sky glowing orange from terminal windows. The smell of burning cloth filled the air. The nation's biggest airport had turned into a scene of chaos. Inside the cargo zone, workers scrambled to save what they could. Boxes marked "Made in Bangladesh," worth thousands of dollars, were tossed aside as crews tried to pull others from the fire's reach. But the blaze was too fast, too hot, too large. The struggle to contain the fire for nearly 2 hours, firefighters battled the inferno. Oxygen tanks, textile bundles, and even wooden pallets fed the flames. The cargo building's design made things worse. Narrow corridors, stacked goods, and poor ventilation. One fire chief later said, "We were fighting both the fire and the structure itself." By the time the blaze was brought under control, it had already consumed tens of thousands of square feet of storage space. What remained was devastation. Twisted metal, charred boxes, blackened walls, and the smell of burnt fabric hanging over the airport grounds. Then came the silence, the heavy kind that follows tragedy. The damage, a nightmare for exporters. When dawn broke, the reality was clear. Bangladesh's garment industry had taken a direct hit. Officials began assessing the damage. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of cartons of ready-made garments, packed and labeled for shipment to brands in the US, UK, Germany, and France, had been reduced to ashes. Exporters watched helplessly as their livelihoods, months of labor, production, and deadlines, vanished overnight. Initial estimates suggested tens of millions of dollars in losses. But industry insiders feared the real figure was even higher. The Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, BGMEA, reported that over 70 exporters were directly affected. Their goods completely destroyed or delayed beyond recovery. For some factories, the shipments lost represented an entire month's revenue. And in the garment business, where profit margins are razor-thin, such a loss can be fatal. The human side, the factory workers behind the numbers. Behind every burned carton were thousands of stories. In Bangladesh, more than 4 million people work in the ready-made garment sector, most of them women. They are the backbone of the country's economy, the hands that stitch the shirts, jeans, and jackets worn across the world. For many, this airport blaze wasn't just about lost goods, it meant unpaid wages, delayed contracts, and uncertainty about the future. Factories that lost entire shipments had no immediate backup funds. Some owners were forced to shut operations temporarily. Others had to tell their workers, "We can't pay this month." In a nation where every paycheck feeds an entire family, that single sentence hit harder than the flames. The supply chain collapse. How a fire stopped global brands. Within hours of the fire, logistics systems went haywire. Export documentation, barcodes, and shipping manifests stored in the same cargo area were either burned or water damaged. As a result, customs clearance came to a halt. Even unaffected shipments couldn't move because no one could verify their paperwork. At least 40 flights, including cargo services to Dubai, London, Frankfurt, and New York, faced major delays. Global supply chains that depended on Bangladesh's fast turnaround times suddenly froze. International buyers began calling, demanding updates. Where are our goods? When can you ship? Exporters had no answers. For fast fashion retailers, where trends change every few weeks, even a 2-week delay can make a shipment worthless. As one exporter put it, "Our clothes are not gold. They lose value with time." That single night's blaze didn't just burn fabric. It burned deadlines, trust, and contracts. The economic aftershock, counting the billions. The numbers that followed were staggering. Bangladesh exports over $45 billion worth of garments each year, roughly 85% of its total exports. And most of it passes through Dhaka's airport. So when the cargo section shut down for just 48 hours, the entire national economy felt it. Shipments worth over $100 million were delayed. Insurance claims flooded in. Exporters scrambled to redirect flights, some moving goods to Chattogram or even shipping by sea. But air freight is irreplaceable for time-sensitive orders. What couldn't fly on time was lost forever. Some brands canceled contracts outright, citing force majeure. Others demanded discounts of up to 50% for delayed deliveries. For small and medium-sized exporters, that meant financial ruin. A single incident at the airport had triggered a ripple effect, from factory floors in Ghazipur and Narayanganj to retail shelves in Paris and New York. The investigation. What really caused the fire? At first, officials blamed an electrical short circuit. But as investigators dug deeper, the story became murkier. The fire started in a section of the cargo area where goods were stored temporarily before inspection. Initial findings showed that fire safety systems were non-functional, sprinklers inactive, alarms delayed, and extinguishers outdated. In a facility handling flammable goods like textiles and packaging, that's a ticking time bomb. Firefighters also reported that access roads were blocked by parked trucks and containers, delaying their response. Security footage showed smoke filling the area for almost 5 minutes before alarms even went off. Those 5 minutes were all it took for disaster to unfold. One airport official admitted anonymously, "Everyone knew the cargo area was overloaded and outdated. We were waiting for upgrades." But tragedy came first. The global response, buyers and brands. React news of the blaze spread fast across global media. Headlines read, "Fire at Bangladesh Airport Disrupts Garment Supply Chain." International buyers panicked. Major brands began contacting suppliers, demanding updates on their shipments and reassurance about future reliability. Some large retailers even started diverting future orders to Vietnam and Cambodia, fearing instability in Bangladesh's logistics chain. For an industry that competes on speed and reliability, the reputation damage was severe. Bangladesh's garment sector had fought for decades to build global trust. This fire set it back years. The aftermath. Recovery and rebuilding. Days after the blaze, cleanup began. Firefighters cooled the smoldering debris, and investigators sealed off burned sections for forensic testing. Exporters, meanwhile, began the long road to recovery. Some rushed to remake burned orders, working double shifts to avoid losing contracts. Others negotiated with airlines and buyers for extensions. Insurance companies faced a tidal wave of claims and disputes over responsibility. At government level, emergency committees were formed to restore operations quickly. Within a week, limited cargo services resumed. But the scars, both financial and psychological, ran deep. Many exporters described it as a blow worse than COVID-19 lockdowns. The wider lesson: when an industry relies on one lifeline. The fire exposed a painful truth. Bangladesh's export system is too centralized. Nearly 80% of all air exports pass through one airport, Dhaka. That means a single accident can paralyze the entire economy. Experts have long warned that diversification, developing regional cargo hubs, was essential. The government has plans for Sylhet's Osmani Airport and Chattagram's Patenga Terminal, but progress has been slow. This fire finally forced action. The government announced a new plan to decentralize air cargo operations and modernize storage facilities with real-time fire detection systems and automated sprinklers. But those upgrades will take time, and exporters who lost millions can't wait that long. The human cost. Stories from the ground among the chaos, individual stories painted the real picture. At a small factory in Narayanganj, owner Farida Begum stood near her sewing line, staring at the news. She had shipped 8,000 jackets 2 days earlier, all lost in the fire. That was her biggest order of the year. Now, she owed her workers' salaries, her buyer penalties, and her bank loan's interest, with nothing left to sell. "I lost everything in that fire," she said softly, "and I can't even prove it." The paperwork burned, too. For workers like Salma, who earns less than $120 a month, the uncertainty was devastating. "We heard the shipment burned," she said. "The factory might close." I don't know what happens next. Multiply that fear by thousands, and you understand the real damage, not just economic, but emotional. The future. Can Bangladesh recover? Despite the losses, Bangladesh's resilience is legendary. The country has survived factory collapses, global recessions, and pandemics, and every time it came back stronger. Within a month of the blaze, exporters began finding new ways to rebuild. Emergency shipments were rerouted through alternative airports. Factories doubled production to meet replacement orders, and global buyers, seeing the determination, started extending support. But there's still one critical question. Will this incident finally spark long-term change? Bangladesh's garment sector contributes nearly 12% of the country's GDP. If it fails to modernize its infrastructure, from warehouses to logistics, this won't be the last fire we see. The fire that exposed a system. In the end, the Dhaka airport blaze wasn't just an accident. It was a revelation. It showed how fragile the backbone of Bangladesh's economy really is. One spark in one warehouse paralyzed exports worth millions, jeopardized jobs, and exposed years of neglect in infrastructure and safety. But it also showed the strength of a nation that refuses to give up. Within days, flights resumed, orders restarted, and the same workers who feared losing everything were back at their machines, sewing under bright lights and louder determination. Bangladesh's garment industry was built on resilience, forged in fire, literally and figuratively. And as the world looks back on the blaze that nearly broke its supply chain, one thing stands clear. The global fashion industry depends on Bangladesh. But Bangladesh needs protection from the very systems that made it successful. So, what do you think? Was this disaster just an accident? Or a symptom of a broken system? Should global brands do more to ensure safer logistics in countries that make their clothes? Or should the responsibility fall entirely on local authorities? Drop your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this story eye-opening, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here at Nilo Airspace, we tell the stories the world too often overlooks. Until next time, remember, behind every label that says "Made in Bangladesh," there's a story of resilience, sacrifice, and survival. And sometimes, a fire that reminds the world how fragile that system really is.